Good afternoon, students, and welcome back. In the last session, we have been discussing a very important chapter of supply chain management, and that is purchase management. And as always, we are going to do a very quick recap, a review of whatever we discussed the last time we met last Tuesday. Why it is important? Because by purchase management, we mean that the firms, in order to produce their goods, they need to acquire goods and services from external sources, and there is some strict discipline process are involved in doing the purchasing, because any purchases which are not as per the requirement of the company may spoil the reputation of the company, because it will not help the firm in producing the right kind of product. Let us quickly refer to the slide and we will see what the definition of purchasing is all about, though we discussed last time. And as always, please refer to some of the very key points of this particular slide. We talk of acquiring goods or services, and why do we need it? Because we have to accomplish the goals of the enterprise. Every production firm, they need supplies. It can be materials, raw materials, it could be spare parts, and it can be logistic services as well. It could be service as well. So the purchasing manager has a responsibility to purchase based on the requirement of other departments. As we have discussed earlier, purchases are not made for the purchase department. Purchase department has a responsibility of purchasing on behalf of other departments, and this is done based on certain mission, purpose, goal and objective of the firm. The company needs the supplies, the company needs raw materials or spare parts to produce their finished goods, to produce their product. They also need to purchase logistic services, and they need to be bought from external sources. So a very strict purchase management is required in every organization to ensure that the procurement is done as per the plan and objectives of the firm. So what do we learn in purchase management? Why purchasing is done? What is the objective? There are certain principles that needs to be followed. The purchasing department has certain functions. There are certain methods which has to be followed for purchasing, and there are certain steps. The purchasing cannot be done in an haphazard way. There are certain steps that needs to be followed, and we will discuss that in slides later on. So what are the objectives? Again, please refer to some of the very key words over here which are essential, like for instance, satisfactory material. It should satisfy the need of the company. It should satisfy what is required for the production. You need to negotiate with the suppliers. You need to ensure that the purchase is done at the optimum price, because all purchases in supply chain management, whether it is small or big, overall it requires huge investment, significant amount of investment. So every company, every enterprise needs to ensure that they do proper negotiations with suppliers who are producing, from whom they are purchasing the raw materials or spare parts or semi-finished goods or services. They need to coordinate with the other departments, because as we said in the earlier slide, that the purchase department is a coordinator between departments who need the raw materials or spare parts and the suppliers. So they need to have they need to create that proper bridge between the departments and the suppliers. They need to ensure that whatever that is purchased are delivered on time. They need to ensure that the supply is regular, continuous, without any breakage, without any disruptions, without any wastages. They need to ensure that the quality is maintained, the control of quantity of material is maintained, and the purchasing department also needs to keep a look or be aware of what are the new materials and processes which are available in the market. So, these are the objectives, as we have said. This is the first phase. There is an objective, there is a reason for purchasing. No purchasing is made without a reason. If there is no need, no purchasing is made, whether it is a raw material or a spare part or any logistic services. Certain department will definitely need a purchase to be done, and it is the responsibility of the purchase department to ensure that they negotiate, they select the right kind of suppliers and the vendors and do the right kind of purchases for that particular department. The next slide is very important. We said about the 4 P's of purchase management: purpose, policy, practices and procedure. By purpose, we also mean the objectives. That is the reason. Why should a company buy? Why should a company purchase? Why should a company procure certain materials, supplies, raw materials or logistic services? In order to purchase, there are certain policies of the company that needs to be followed. Every company has their own policy for purchasing, some certain rules, certain mandates, certain ethics, certain principles. There are certain practices and there are certain procedures that needs to be followed. Purchasing cannot be done without a procedure. By a procedure, we mean steps, we mean phases. So, this procedure starting from maybe requisition to approval to purchasing. So, there are certain procedures, certain steps that needs to be followed for every purchase that is being done by the purchase department of a company. What are the key issues? Yes, in the previous slide we have mentioned the 4 P's. Now, while doing a purchase, there are few things that a purchase department needs to consider all the time. A, the quantity that needs to be purchased. A purchase department, by quantity we mean the volume of services, the amount of raw materials, the amount of spare parts, the number of spare parts, the volume of spare parts or raw materials, or the frequency of the logistic services. No purchase department can buy there anything in excess or anything less than what is required. The quality is extremely important, because based on the quality, the company's own performance, the company's own product depends upon the quality of the materials or the raw materials or the spare parts produced, because these raw materials and spare parts actually contribute to the finished product. If the quality of the raw materials or the spare parts are not good, are not as desired, then the final product will not be as per what the customer needs or the market needs. It is essential that when you do a purchase, you have to ensure that the services or the spare parts or the items that are purchased are delivered on time. Because in supply chain management, students, we have to understand that this is a chain. Everything is linked with each other, every function is linked with each other. If supplies are not delivered on time, the production is not going to happen on time. If the production is not going to happen on time, the deliveries to the customers will get delayed. So, time is important. And place, where are we going to buy this from? Where are we going to buy these spare parts from? Where are we going to buy the raw materials from? Are we going to buy it within our country? Are we going to buy it locally? Are we going to buy it from other state? Are we going to buy from maybe other countries? So, place, quantity, quality, time and place. These are the 4 essential issues that always needs to be considered while doing a purchase. So, if you see in the next slide, we are actually talking about certain principles, and the principles are basically a combination of the quality, quantity, the right price, the time, the place, and the right source. By right source, we mean the right supplier. Who is the source of the raw material, who is the source of the spare parts, who is the source of providing logistic services. We had discussed the certain procedure. We said certain steps needs to be followed. Purchase management follows certain steps one after the other, and the steps cannot be overtaken or the steps cannot be deviated from each other. So, identification is required. We have to identify the need of the purchase. By identification, we need to know which department needs, what is the quantity required, what is the quality required by the department, whether it is a spare part or a raw material or whatever it may be. A team is formed to analyze and study, an evaluation is done, negotiation with the vendor is done, then actual acquisition is made. When I say acquisition, actual purchase is done, delivery is made. Once delivery is done, a post evaluation is done. That means, once a delivery is made of the raw material or the spare parts or any item, the team has to assess whether whatever is delivered is as per the contract, is as per the requirement placed, whether the supplier has fulfilled all the requirement that was placed in the contract, whether they have deviated, and based on that they will decide whether they are going to engage this particular supplier for a long term or on a short term, whether they are going to work with them in future or not. The next slide, very important, what is the best practices for procurement? What should be the ideal, what are the ideal practices that needs to be followed for procurement? There are organized processes, we get information, then we ask for quotation, and then we ask for a proposal from our supplier. So, it has to go in that particular order. We should ensure that a proposal or a quotation is asked from different sources and not from very limited or selected sources. That means, we have to understand that there we need to create a competition to ensure that we get the best price and the best quality. We also need to look at the fairness. By fairness, we mean the decision should not be biased. The decision of purchase or procurement should not be biased. It has to be based on certain standard norms, maybe the quality, maybe the background of the supplier, maybe the strength of the supplier, the price, the quality that he is capable of providing. All these parameters, all these metrics needs to be considered, and a fair deal should be a fair contract or a fair negotiation or a fair selection of supplier has to be done. Ethical practices. By ethical practices, if you remember, I said last time that when you do a purchase for the company, you are actually doing the purchase, you are doing the you are paying to a particular vendor on behalf of the company. The product, whether it is a raw material or spare parts, is required by the company. So, the interest of the company comes first. There cannot be any individual interests. So, some ethical practices needs to be followed. Let us go back to the slide. Integrity on policy of shared information. By this we mean that when we negotiate with a supplier or a number of suppliers, there are a lot of information exchanges. The company is required, the company who is purchasing that product is expected to provide a number of information to the supplier, quite obviously, because without those information the supplier won't be in a position to provide the right and correct quotation or proposal. At the same time, through RFI, the supplier is also providing some valuable information to the company who is doing the purchase. These informations more often than none are quite confidential. It is essential that an integrity is maintained, so that informations are not shared with others. That means, the information about one particular supplier should not be shared with others. So, there should be an absolute confidentiality as far as the information is concerned. A purchase should be made with an intention to appoint a vendor for a long term basis and not on a short term. If you remember, when we discuss inbound and outbound logistics, we discuss VCP, we discuss vendor compliance program. In the vendor compliance program, the key issue was to engage a vendor for a long term basis, to create a relationship of trust, to create a relationship of understanding. By doing so, both the supplier as well as the purchaser gets benefit in terms of services, in terms of price, in terms of efficiency. So, the intention should be to purchase for a long term, to create a long term relationship. So, we also need to follow the best practices and procedures. So, these are the best practices that needs to be followed while purchasing, while executing a purchase. Methods of purchasing, if you can just have a look at the slide again. According to requirement, again please refer to a few words in the slide. Requirement, period, market purchasing, speculative purchasing, contract purchasing and schedule purchasing. These 6 methods of purchasing will be discussed at length, students, in the future slides. Procurement has a cycle. It starts at a point and it revolves and come back to. So, it can also be, you can also say that there is a method, there is a process, and that process is called a cycle. Let us see how the cycle goes. We first gather information. By gathering information, we mean that the customer first research the suppliers who can satisfy the requirement for the product needed. Then the supplier is contacted. When a prospective supplier has been identified, the customer request quotations, information, tender. We do a background check of the service provider. Once we are satisfied that this supplier is in a position, is the right supplier to meet the requirement of the company, we negotiate with the supplier in terms of delivery times, in terms of costs, in terms of other parameters, other factors. Then comes, once negotiation has been done and a price is decided upon, it is the responsibility of the supplier to fulfill the need of the customer through delivery. Once shipment is delivered, payment is made, and after training is made, sometime installation, training, etc. is also required. Once that is done, the contract is up for renewal. So, this is the cycle. We identify which supplier, which is the right kind of supplier, who can fulfill the need of my company, who can fulfill what exactly is required in terms of raw materials, in terms of spare parts, in terms of logistic services, whatever that I intend to buy from an external source. Then I identify the supplier, I contact the supplier. After I contact the supplier, I seek information from the supplier. I seek information about the background of the supplier, the customers that he is working with, his tenure of services, any recommendations. So, all kinds of information that gives a level of confidence to the manufacturer or to the buyer. Once that is done, once the supplier has provided information, a quotation and a proposal, then we negotiate to arrive at the best price possible. That is the negotiation. So, the cycle comes this way. After negotiation, once negotiation is done, fulfillment, the customer, the supplier has to deliver the items, that either the items could be, as I said, raw materials or spare parts, or in terms of services. Once delivery is done, it is the responsibility of the buyer, the manufacturer or the company to pay the supplier. Once the supplier is paid, it ends the fulfillment part of purchasing, and based on his performance throughout a particular period, the contract is either renewed or terminated or cancelled. So, it goes through a particular cycle. Let us go to the next slide, which would be new as far this particular session is concerned, and it says about the function of the purchasing department. We said why you have to understand why purchase management is so important and critical in supply chain management. Because why do a company buy? Why do a company purchase? A finished good, whatever it may be an industrial good, it can be a consumer good, it can be any product. That product is made up of the raw materials or the spare parts. When a car is made, when a vehicle is made, that is made up of several spare parts received or bought from different suppliers. Similarly, any product involves supply of different kinds of raw materials. So, we have to understand that any sort of wrong purchase, any sort of purchase which is erroneous, which does not follow the company policy, which does not follow the quality that is required, is going to end up having a bad product, and that is going to harm the company's reputation and brand in the market. So, the purchase management and the purchase department plays a very significant and important role in the entire supply chain process. So, let us go and see what are the functions of the purchasing department. Processing the requisition. What do you mean by requisition? A requisition, as we said, the purchase department do not buy or procure items for their own needs and requirements. It is for a particular department. The format that is shown in the slide is not necessarily sacrosanct. Every department, every company, every organization or enterprise have their own requisition process or formats. But by basically a department has to send a requisition to the purchase department to procure item on their behalf, and it is the responsibility of the purchase department, once that requisition is received, to process that requisition, to take that requisition forward through the different approval process. What is the second step? What is the second function? The first function, yes, is to process the requisition sent by the department. Number 2, location and choice of supplier, which is extremely important, to select the supplier that would satisfy the needs, that would satisfy the kind of product that is required, the kind of raw material or spare parts or services required by the company. For that, there are 5 things that a purchase department needs to aim at: reliability, assurance of timely delivery. Once delivery is done, he should get an assurance that there would be after sales services. That means, once a delivery of the product is done or a delivery service is done, there should be a continuous follow up on the part of the supplier to ensure that the product delivered is in the right condition and shape. Attitude with regard to the goods rejected by the purchaser. In case the good is rejected by the purchaser, the supplier should have the right attitude to accept and replace the goods. Also, in case technical assistance is required, sometimes a company purchases machineries which needs installations, we needs electrical connections, and the supplier should be in a position to provide that technical assistance. So, reliability of the supplier, A. Assurance from the supplier, that is the second function of the purchase department, to ensure that the supplier that they select is reliable. They should be in a position to deliver on time whatever they promise, because depending upon the delivery, the other functions in the supply chain is going to run or function. They have to ensure that once delivery is made, a follow up is done by the purchaser or the company who is selling the product to ensure that everything is as required by the company. Sometimes a delivery is made, but the item may be found damaged, the item may be found not as per the requirement of the company. So, a company can also reject a particular shipment delivered by the supplier. As I said, I repeat, when I say a supplier, it means supplier of a raw material or semi-finished goods or logistic services. The company may reject, may not accept the particular product, they may not accept the delivery. The supplier should be positive and professional enough and reliable to ensure that they deliver, they redeliver, they replace the product that is rejected by the company. And lastly, in case there are installations required, there are technical assistance required, which is not a capability of the company who has made the purchase. The company who has made the purchase may not have the technical resources to do the installation. So, the company has to ensure that they provide all the technical assistance to ensure that the delivery is done the way it was required. So, as a continuation, the original copy is sent to the supplier, one copy is retained by the purchase department. This is basically a step. Number 3 is placing the order. Now, you have identified the need of purchase, you have identified the right kind of supplier. Now, once you have identified the supplier who is going to fulfill your need, the third function of the purchase department is to place an order. So, different company follows different methods of placing orders. By placing order means you have to issue a work order or a purchase order through which, based on which the supplier is going to deliver the goods to the company. Let us go back to the slide and see what placing order means. All purchases should be made through a purchase order in a specified form and duly signed by authorized persons. So, why a purchase order? Because a supplier is expected to deliver goods as specified in the purchase order. We will show in a later slide a format or an example of a purchase order. So, there are few things which are extremely important in a purchase order, like the description of the item, the quantity of the item, the price per unit. All these things are mentioned in a purchase order, and based on that purchase order, the supplier is expected to deliver the goods. Any deviation from the purchase order may affect the payment by the buyer to the supplier. Number 4. Now that a purchase has been made, what is the fourth function of the purchase department? Follow up or progressing the purchase order. Receiving the ordered material at the right time. Now the purchase department has issued a purchase order to the supplier. So he is asking the supplier, please deliver the good. He is given an order to deliver the good. Now he has to ensure that the supplier executes a job as per the purchase order at the right time. Late deliveries can close the enterprise. The priority of follow-up operations. The priority of follow-up operations should be given according to the importance of classification of items. Example, A class items are to be given topmost priority. So, a company has issued a purchase order to the supplier. He has to ensure that the supplier honors or goes by the specifications in the purchase order. One thing that is most important is the time, because based on its supply, the company's future operations will get affected or not will depend upon the deliveries of supplies from the supplier. Also to ensure that the most important and critical items are delivered. So, as per the priority, so time and priority, that is the fourth function of the purchase department, to ensure, to follow up and ensure that the supplier is delivering the goods as per the specifications in the purchase order. Let us see what are the types of procurement documents that are required. By RFP, we mean a request for proposal. RFI is a request for information. RFQ, a request for quotation. Solicitation, offers, contracts, amendments. By RFI, we mean request for information. That means what product and service are potentially available in the marketplace to meet a buyer's needs and to know the capability. RFP, a proposal and an early stage in a procurement process which is invited from a particular supplier. RFQ, a request for quotation, used when discussing the bidders and not required when the specification of a product or service is already known and when price is the main or only factor. So, I come to the quotation when I require a price. By RFI, I am asking information about the particular supplier to understand the capability of the supplier. By RFP, we mean an initial proposal. I ask for a proposal from a supplier proposing to offer their product or services to my company. Solicitation, these are invitation of bids, request for quotations or proposals. Offers, these are procurement documents like bids, proposals. So, by offers, we mean an offer made by the supplier to the purchaser, to the company. Contracts, by contract we mean once a negotiation is done, when a supplier is identified, a legal contract is done between the supplier and the buyer depending upon the period, quantity and the different parameters or the requirements of the company. So, these are the procurement documents. While doing a procurement, these are the documents that are essentially required: RFP, RFI, request for quotations, solicitation, offers, contracts, amendments, modifications. As the name or the word would imply, that in case there is a change is required in solicitations, in the offers or in the contract, in case there is a sudden change that is required once an offer is made, once a contract is signed, once a quotation has been given, sometimes there is a need to make some changes. So, that is also a document which is called amendment. This is a sample of an RFQ or an RFI, okay. And in the next session we are going to discuss few other documents like the purchase order or the commercial invoice, and as I said, these are just examples. Every company follows different formats based on their particular product that they buy, based on their requirement, and this will be discussed at the other side of the break in the next session. Till such time, thank you.